The blood-red sunset painted the Wyoming sky as Vivian Reynolds clutched the telegram in her trembling hands. 3 years since she'd fled her husband's brutal fists, 3 years building a new life, and now 5 words threatened everything. I know where you are. Wyoming Territory, 1878. Vivian's breath caught as she read the telegram again, her heart hammering against her ribs. Daniel Garland, owner of the Silver Creek Ranch where she worked as a cook, noticed her distress immediately. "Vivian, what's wrong?" Daniel asked, his voice carrying across the ranch house kitchen. She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Instead, she handed him the telegram, her fingers stiff with fear. Daniel's eyes narrowed as he read the message. At 32, he stood over 6 feet tall with broad shoulders and calloused hands that spoke of years of hard labor. His dark brown hair curled slightly at the ends, and a neatly trimmed beard framed a face weathered by sun and wind. But it was his eyes that drew Vivian, deep blue and surprisingly gentle for a man who commanded respect throughout the territory. "Victor," she whispered, finally finding her voice. "My husband. He's found me." Daniel's jaw tightened. "He can't touch you here." "You don't know him," Vivian said, unconsciously touching the small scar above her right eyebrow, a permanent reminder of Victor's temper. "When Victor wants something, he takes it, and he considers me his property." "Not anymore," Daniel said firmly, placing the telegram on the kitchen table. "Not ever again." Vivian wanted to believe him, but 3 years of freedom couldn't erase 5 years of terror. At 27, she had already lived several lifetimes of pain. Her auburn hair, now free of the severe style Victor had demanded, fell in loose waves past her shoulders. Her green eyes, once perpetually downcast, now met Daniel's with a directness that would have earned her a backhand from Victor. "I should leave," she said, wiping flour-covered hands on her apron. "If he comes here, he'll bring trouble to everyone." "Running won't solve anything," Daniel replied. "How many times have you moved already?" 3, 4, 5, she admitted. Each time thinking she'd gone far enough, each time building a new life only to abandon it when fear found her again. "And has it brought you peace?" Daniel asked gently. Vivian looked around the warm kitchen at the home she'd helped create over the past 8 months. At Silver Creek, she'd found more than employment. She'd found friendship, respect, and something she hadn't dared name that flickered between her and Daniel. "No," she finally answered. "But I don't want anyone hurt because of me." Daniel stepped closer, not touching her. He never touched her without permission, but close enough that she could smell the leather and pine scent that clung to him. "We take care of our own at Silver Creek," he said. "And like it or not, you're one of us now." Before Vivian could respond, the ranch foreman, Jake Cooper, burst through the door. "Boss," he said, breathless from running. "Rider coming. Says he's looking for Mrs. Reynolds." Vivian's blood turned to ice. It couldn't be Victor already. The telegram had only arrived today, unless he'd sent it from nearby. "Is it him?" Daniel asked her, his hand instinctively moving to the revolver at his hip. "I don't know," she whispered. "I need to see." Against Daniel's protests, Vivian moved to the window. The approaching rider wasn't Victor. This man was shorter, wiry, with a rat-like face she recognized all too well. "Silas Turner," she said, her voice hollow. "Victor's right-hand man." Daniel's expression hardened. "Jake, round up the boys. I want them nearby but not obvious." Jake nodded and disappeared. "Vivian," Daniel said softly, "you don't have to face him." She squared her shoulders. "Yes, I do. If I hide now, I'll never stop hiding." Daniel studied her face for a moment, then nodded. "I'll be right beside you." They stepped onto the porch as Silas Turner reined his horse to a stop in the dusty yard. His eyes found Vivian immediately, a sly grin spreading across his face. "Mrs. Reynolds," he called. "Fancy finding you all the way out here." "What do you want, Silas?" Vivian asked, proud that her voice remained steady. "Just delivering a message from your husband," Silas replied, dismounting. "He says it's time for you to come home." "She is home," Daniel said, his voice like steel. Silas looked Daniel up and down, sizing him up. "This doesn't concern you, Cowboy. This is between a man and his wife." "Former wife," Vivian corrected. "I left Victor 3 years ago," Silas laughed, an unpleasant sound. "That ain't how the law sees it, madam. You're still bound to him and he wants what's his." Daniel stepped forward. "Mrs. Reynolds isn't property. She's staying here of her own free will, and she'll leave the same way if she chooses to." "Victor won't take kindly to interference," Silas warned, his hand hovering near his pistol. "And I don't take kindly to threats on my land," Daniel replied evenly. "Tell Victor that if he wants to talk to Vivian, he can come himself, but I promise you this, she won't be going anywhere against her will." Silas's eyes narrowed. "He'll be here within the week, and he won't be as polite as me." "I'll be waiting," Daniel said. With a final glare at Vivian, Silas mounted his horse. "He's changed, you know, cleaned up his ways. He just wants his family back." Vivian thought of the baby she'd lost when Victor pushed her down the stairs. "I stopped being his family the moment he raised his hand to me." Something like disgust flickered across Silas's face. "Victor said you'd be difficult. He'll be disappointed." "Tell him not to come," Vivian said. "I won't go with him." "Oh, he'll come all right," Silas replied, tipping his hat mockingly. "And you might want to prepare your cowboy friend here for what that means." As Silas rode away, Vivian felt her legs weaken. Daniel caught her elbow gently, steadying her. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded, but tears threatened. "I'm sorry, Daniel. I've brought this trouble to your door." "Look at me, Vivian," he said softly, waiting until she met his eyes. "This is not your fault. None of it." For 3 years she'd been running, looking over her shoulder, waiting for this moment. Now that it had come, she felt strangely calm alongside her fear. "Victor Reynolds is a dangerous man," she said. "When I left Denver, he owned half the city council and most of the police force. If he's coming himself, he means business." Daniel's expression remained determined. "Then we'll be ready." That evening, after the ranch hands had been informed of the situation, Daniel found Vivian sitting alone on the back porch, staring at the stars. "Mind some company?" he asked. She smiled, gesturing to the empty chair beside her. "It's your porch." "It's yours too, for as long as you want it to be," he replied, settling beside her. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, listening to the night sounds: crickets, the distant howl of a coyote, the soft nickering of horses in the barn. "Tell me about him," Daniel finally said. "If I'm going to protect you, I need to know what we're facing." Vivian took a deep breath. She'd never told anyone the full story, but Daniel deserved to know. "I was 19 when I met Victor," she began. "He was 34, handsome, charming, and the most successful businessman in Denver. My father had just died, leaving nothing but debts. Victor swept in, paid everything off, and 6 months later we were married." She paused, remembering the young, naive girl she'd been. "The first year was good. He was generous, attentive. Then his business hit troubles and he started drinking. The first time he hit me, he cried afterward, swore it would never happen again." She gave a bitter laugh. "It became a pattern: violence, then remorse, then more violence." Daniel's hand rested on the arm of his chair, inches from hers, offering support without pressure. "When I found out I was expecting, I thought things would change," she continued. "Instead, they got worse. He accused me of infidelity, said the child wasn't his. One night, after a particularly bad argument." Her voice faltered. "You don't have to continue," Daniel said gently. "No, you need to understand." Vivian straightened her shoulders. "He pushed me down the stairs. I lost the baby." While I was recovering in bed, I heard him telling the doctor I'd fallen. That's when I knew I had to leave. How did you get away? Daniel asked. Victor's housekeeper, Martha, helped me. Her sister had suffered similar abuse. She gave me money she'd saved and helped me flee in the middle of the night. I've been running ever since, staying nowhere longer than 6 months until Silver Creek. Daniel's expression was unreadable in the moonlight. What made you stay here? Vivian considered the question. At first it was exhaustion. I was tired of running. Then, she looked at him directly. Then it was the people. You, Mrs. Cooper, the ranch hands. For the first time in years I felt safe. You are safe, Daniel insisted. No one's safe from Victor when he's determined, Vivian replied. He built his fortune by crushing anyone who stood in his way. He won't hesitate to do the same to you. Daniel leaned forward, his eyes intense. Vivian, I need you to understand something. Silver Creek isn't just a ranch to me, it's everything I've worked for since I was 16. I've defended it against rustlers, land grabbers, and nature itself. I won't let Victor Reynolds take anything or anyone from it. The conviction in his voice stirred something in Vivian. Hope, perhaps, or the dangerous feeling of attachment she'd been fighting since she arrived. Why would you risk everything for me? She asked quietly. Daniel seemed surprised by the question. Because it's the right thing to do. But Vivian sensed there was more. Something in the way Daniel looked at her. Something in how he always seemed to be nearby when she needed help but never hovering. Something in how his eyes followed her when he thought she wasn't looking. Just the right thing, she pressed. Daniel looked down at his hands, then back at her. No, he admitted. Not just that. The air between them seemed to thicken. For a moment, Vivian thought he might reach for her hand, might speak the words that hovered unspoken between them. Instead, he stood. Get some rest, Vivian. Tomorrow we start preparing. As he walked away, Vivian remained on the porch, more determined than ever not to let Victor destroy this place or this man who had come to mean so much to her. The next 5 days passed in a flurry of activity. Daniel sent riders to neighboring ranches, calling in favors and warning friends about potential trouble. The ranch hands, loyal to Daniel and fond of Vivian's cooking and kind nature, checked weapons and strengthened defenses. Vivian insisted on contributing, practicing with a small revolver Daniel gave her. Her hands shook the first time she held it, remembering how Victor had threatened her with his own gun more than once. I can't, she said, trying to return the weapon to Daniel after missing every target. You can, he assured her. I've seen your strength, Vivian. This is just one more thing you'll master. His faith in her was startling. By the 5th day, she could hit the target consistently, though the sound of gunfire still made her flinch. That evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Daniel found Vivian in the kitchen, kneading bread dough with unusual vigor. Imagining that's Victor's face, he asked, a hint of humor in his voice. Vivian smiled despite her anxiety. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who knows you, he replied, leaning against the doorframe. The casual statement warmed her. Did he know her? Sometimes it felt like he saw straight through to parts of herself she'd forgotten existed. Any word? She asked, shaping the dough into loaves. Nothing yet. But my sources in town say 3 men checked into the hotel yesterday, city types asking questions about Silver Creek Ranch. Vivian's hands stilled. Victor's advance men. He always sends people ahead to scout. Daniel nodded. That's what I figured. Means he'll likely arrive tomorrow or the next day. Are we ready? She asked quietly. As ready as we can be, Daniel replied. 10 of my men, plus 5 from the Carson place and 3 from Wilkins. All good men who owe me favors or hate bullies or both. Vivian wiped flour from her hands. I never wanted to bring war to your doorstep, Daniel. He crossed the kitchen in 3 strides, standing before her. "You didn't bring anything but goodness to Silver Creek, Vivian. The war is Victor's doing, not yours." For the first time he reached out, taking her flour-dusted hands in his. The touch was electric, sending warmth up her arms. "I need you to promise me something," he said, his voice low and intense. "What?" she whispered. "If things go badly tomorrow, if it looks like we can't hold them off, you'll run." "Jake knows a place in the mountains where you can hide until I can come for you." Vivian shook her head. "I won't leave you to face Victor alone, not when this is my fight." "It's our fight now," Daniel insisted, "and I need to know you're safe to fight it properly." Their eyes locked, a battle of wills. Vivian saw the concern in his eyes, but also something deeper, something that made her breath catch. "All right," she finally agreed, "but only as a last resort." Daniel squeezed her hands gently before releasing them. "Thank you." That night, Vivian couldn't sleep. She paced her small room, thinking of Victor's imminent arrival. What would he do when he saw her? What would he do to Daniel and the others who protected her? A soft knock at her door startled her. "Vivian, are you awake?" Daniel's voice came through the wood. She opened the door to find him looking as sleepless as she felt. "Couldn't rest either?" she asked. He shook his head. "Too much thinking, would you? Would you walk with me, just on the porch? The night air might help." Something in his manner, an unusual hesitancy, made her curious. "Of course." They walked silently through the sleeping house to the front porch. The night was clear, the sky a blanket of stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch. "I've been meaning to tell you something," Daniel said after they had stood gazing at the stars for several minutes. "What is it?" Vivian asked, hearing the seriousness in his tone. Daniel turned to face her, his expression earnest in the moonlight. "If Victor arrives tomorrow, things might get complicated, dangerous even. And I realize there's something you should know in case don't," Vivian interrupted. "Don't speak as if you might not be here tomorrow." "It's not that," he said softly. "It's just, some things shouldn't remain unsaid." Her heart began to pound. "Then say them." Daniel took a deep breath. "When you first came to Silver Creek, I hired you because Mrs. Cooper was getting too old to manage the cooking alone. I respected your work, your quiet dignity, but somewhere along the way it became more. You became more." Vivian stood perfectly still, afraid to break the spell of his words. "I know you've been hurt," he continued. "I know trust doesn't come easily to you, but I need you to know that whatever happens tomorrow, my feelings for you are real. I care for you, Vivian, more than I've cared for anyone in a very long time." Tears pricked at her eyes. For 3 years, she'd kept everyone at arm's length, afraid to form attachments that would make leaving more difficult. But Daniel had slipped past her defenses without even trying. "I care for you too," she whispered. "So much that it scares me." Daniel stepped closer, slowly enough that she could move away if she wanted. She didn't. "May I?" he asked, his hand hovering near her face. She nodded, and his fingers gently brushed her cheek. The tenderness in his touch nearly undid her. "Whatever Victor brings tomorrow," he said, "we'll face it together, and when it's over, if you want to stay at Silver Creek." "I want to stay," she said, surprising herself with her certainty. "Not just at Silver Creek, with you." Daniel's eyes widened, then crinkled at the corners as he smiled. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he lowered his head until his lips met hers. The kiss was gentle, questioning at first, then deepening as Vivian responded, her hands finding their way to his shoulders. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Daniel rested his forehead against hers. "That was worth waiting for," he murmured. Vivian smiled, feeling a happiness she'd thought forever beyond her reach. "Yes, it was." They stood together on the porch for a long time after that, sometimes talking quietly, sometimes simply holding each other in comfortable silence. When the eastern sky began to lighten, Daniel walked her back to her room. "Try to get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow will come soon enough." Vivian caught his hand before he could leave. "Daniel, whatever happens today, thank you for making me feel safe again, for making me feel like myself again." He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "Sleep well, Vivian." As she closed her door, Vivian realized she felt something she hadn't experienced in years: hope. Whatever Victor brought with him, she would no longer face it alone. The morning dawned clear and cool, a deceptively peaceful day for what was to come. Vivian rose early, preparing a hearty breakfast for Daniel and the men who would stand with them. As she worked, her mind kept returning to Daniel's kiss, to the promise of a future she hadn't dared imagine. By mid-morning, 18 men were stationed around the ranch, some visible, others hidden, all armed and watchful. Daniel had insisted Vivian stay inside, close to the back door where Jake's wife, Sarah, waited with 2 saddled horses in case a quick escape became necessary. "I hate this waiting," Vivian said as Daniel checked his revolver for the 3rd time. "It's always the worst part," he agreed, "but it gives us the advantage. Victor will be riding into our territory on our terms." A shout from outside interrupted them. "Riders coming, at least 10, maybe more." Daniel's eyes met Vivian's. "Stay here," he said firmly. "Please." She nodded, though everything in her wanted to stand beside him. Daniel stepped onto the porch, standing tall as the riders approached. From her position by the window, Vivian could see them clearly: 15 men on horseback, with Victor Reynolds leading them. Her stomach clenched at the sight of him. At 43, Victor still cut an impressive figure: tall, broad-shouldered, with silver threading through his dark hair. His expensive suit and confident posture spoke of wealth and power. But Vivian knew the cruelty that lurked behind his handsome facade. The riders stopped in the yard, facing Daniel and his men. For a long moment, silence hung in the air. Then Victor spoke, his voice carrying easily to where Vivian stood. "I'm looking for my wife," he called. "I have reason to believe you're harboring her." "Don't know any Mrs. Reynolds here," Daniel replied evenly. "Just good folks working honest jobs." Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Come now, Mr. Garland, let's not play games. I know Vivian is here. I've spent good money and 3 years tracking her down." "Even if she was," Daniel said, "what makes you think she'd want to see you?" Victor's expression hardened. "She's my wife. The law says she belongs with me." "No woman belongs to any man," Daniel countered. "And from what I hear, you lost any right to call her wife when you raised your hand to her." A murmur ran through Victor's men. Vivian realized with a start that some of them might not know the full story, might believe Victor's likely tale of a wayward wife who needed to be brought home. "Domestic matters are private," Victor said coldly, "and none of your concern. Now, I'll ask once more, where is Vivian?" Before Daniel could answer, Vivian made her decision. She couldn't hide while others fought her battles. Opening the door, she stepped onto the porch beside Daniel. "I'm here, Victor," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Victor's eyes locked on her, a mixture of triumph and anger in his gaze. "Vivian, you've led me on quite a chase." "It wasn't a chase," she replied. "It was an escape." Several of Victor's men shifted uncomfortably in their saddles. "You look well," Victor said, his tone softening in a way Vivian recognized as dangerously deceptive. "Life in the country clearly agrees with you." "Freedom agrees with me," she corrected. Victor's false smile faltered. "You've had your adventure, Vivian. It's time to come home." "I'm willing to forgive your indiscretion." "Indiscretion?" Vivian repeated incredulously. "Is that what you call fleeing for my life after you killed our child?" Shock registered on several faces among Victor's men. Even Silas Turner, standing to Victor's right, looked disturbed. "She's lying," Victor said quickly. She fell. It was an accident. We both know that's not true, Vivian replied, her voice gaining strength. Just like we both know what will happen if I go back with you. Victor's facade of reasonableness began to crack. You have no choice, Vivian. You're my wife before God and the law. She has every choice, Daniel interjected, stepping slightly in front of her. And she's made it clear she's staying here. Victor's eyes narrowed as he assessed Daniel. So that's how it is. You've taken up with this. Cowboy. Mr. Garland has shown me more respect in 8 months than you did in 5 years, Vivian said. Respect, Victor sneered. Is that what they call it out here? Tell me, Vivian, does your cowboy know he's laying claim to damaged goods? Daniel's hand moved to his gun, but Vivian touched his arm, stopping him. I'm not goods at all, Victor, she said calmly. I'm a person, something you never understood. Victor's face darkened with familiar rage. Enough of this farce. You're coming with me, Vivian. Now. No, Daniel said, his voice like iron. She's not. You do well to stay out of this, Cowboy, Victor warned. I have money and connections you can't imagine. Cross me and I'll destroy everything you've built here. Daniel didn't flinch. You can threaten me all you want, Reynolds. But Vivian stays only if she wants to. And I don't want to go with you, Victor, Vivian added firmly. Not now, not ever. Victor looked between them, rage building visibly. She's my wife, not anymore, Vivian said. I stopped being your wife the moment you chose violence over love. With a snarl, Victor turned to his men. Take her. Kill anyone who interferes. Several of his men hesitated, looking uncertain after Vivian's revelations. But others, likely hired guns rather than Victor's regular employees, reached for their weapons. I wouldn't, Daniel warned, his own men immediately raising rifles. You're outmatched and outgunned. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then Victor drew his pistol with surprising speed, aiming not at Daniel but at Vivian. If I can't have her, no one will, he growled. Daniel moved faster than Vivian thought possible, shoving her behind him as Victor fired. The bullet struck Daniel's left shoulder, spinning him halfway around. Before Victor could fire again, a barrage of gunfire erupted from Daniel's men. 2 of Victor's hired guns fell immediately. The others took cover behind their horses or the water trough. Victor himself ducked behind a large oak tree. Daniel, Vivian cried, kneeling beside him as he clutched his bleeding shoulder. I'm all right, he grunted, though his face was pale with pain. Get inside. Not without you, she insisted, helping him to his feet as bullets splintered the wood around them. Together they stumbled into the house, where Sarah Cooper was waiting with bandages. How bad is it? Sarah asked, helping Daniel to a chair. Went through clean, Daniel said through gritted teeth. I'll live. Outside, the gunfight continued. Through the window, Vivian could see Victor's men falling back, outnumbered and outpositioned by Daniel's better prepared forces. They're retreating, she said, relief flooding through her. Don't count on it, Daniel warned, wincing as Sarah cleaned his wound. Victor doesn't give up easily. As if summoned by his words, Victor's voice called out from behind the oak tree. Garland, send Vivian out now and I'll call my men off. Otherwise, I'll burn this whole place to the ground. He means it, Vivian said quietly. He burned down a competitor's warehouse once when they wouldn't sell to him. Daniel stood despite Sarah's protests. I need to end this. You can't go out there, Vivian pleaded. He'll kill you. Daniel took her hand. Listen to me. Jake and the others will keep Victor's men pinned down. I'm going around the back to flank him. I'm coming with you, Vivian said immediately. Daniel started to refuse, then saw the determination in her eyes. Stay behind me, he finally agreed. They slipped out the back door while the gunfire continued in the front yard. Daniel, despite his injury, moved silently through the trees that bordered the eastern side of the ranch house. Vivian followed, her heart pounding. They circled wide, approaching the oak tree where Victor had taken cover. Through the foliage, Vivian could see him reloading his pistol, his face contorted with rage. Daniel signaled for her to stay put, then stepped into the clearing, his gun trained on Victor. "It's over, Reynolds," he said. Victor spun around, his pistol half raised. "Drop it," Daniel commanded. "You've lost." Victor's eyes darted past Daniel, finding Vivian among the trees. A slow, cruel smile spread across his face. "Have I?" he asked. "Because it seems to me I still have something you want." Before either could react, Victor fired not at Daniel but at the branches above Vivian. Wood splintered, startling her backward into the open. "Vivian, run!" Daniel shouted. But Victor was already moving, lunging toward her with surprising speed. He grabbed her arm, yanking her against him and pressing his pistol to her temple. "Now we negotiate," he said, breathing heavily. Daniel's face went deathly calm, his gun unwavering. "Let her go." "Drop your weapon first," Victor countered, "or I'll put a bullet in her head." Vivian stood perfectly still, feeling the cold metal against her skin. She'd been here before, held hostage by Victor's rage, her life balanced on the edge of his control. But this time was different. This time she wasn't alone. "Even if you kill me," she said quietly, "you've still lost, Victor. These men know what you are now. There's nowhere you can go where the truth won't follow." "Shut up," Victor hissed, tightening his grip. "Your own men are deserting you," she continued, seeing several of Victor's hired guns slipping away from the firefight. "They won't follow a man who beats his wife and murders his unborn child." "I said shut up," Victor shouted, pressing the gun harder against her head. Daniel hadn't moved, his gun still aimed at Victor. "Last chance, Reynolds, let her go." Victor laughed, a wild sound. "Or what, you'll shoot me." "With her in the way, I don't think so, Cowboy." "He doesn't have to," Vivian said, meeting Daniel's eyes. In that moment of connection, Vivian found her courage. With a swift movement she'd practiced countless times while cooking, she drew the small knife hidden in her apron and drove it backward, into Victor's thigh. He howled in pain, his grip loosening just enough for Vivian to break free. She dove to the ground as Daniel fired, his bullet catching Victor in the shoulder, the same shoulder where Victor had shot him. Victor stumbled backward, dropping his gun as he clutched at his wound. Before he could recover, Daniel was on him, delivering a powerful blow to his jaw that sent him sprawling. "Stay down," Daniel warned, standing over him. But Victor Reynolds had never learned when to quit. With a roar of rage, he lunged for his fallen pistol. Daniel fired again, the shot echoing through the suddenly quiet ranch yard. Victor fell face first into the dirt, his outstretched hand inches from his gun. Silence descended. The gunfight at the front of the house had stopped, Victor's remaining men surrendering when they realized their employer was down. Daniel rushed to Vivian, helping her to her feet. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, trembling with reaction. "Is he?" Daniel checked Victor's pulse, then stepped back. "Yes." Vivian stared at her husband's body, feeling a complex mixture of emotions: relief, regret, and finally, an overwhelming sense of freedom. "It's over," she whispered. "It's really over." Daniel holstered his gun, then gently turned her away from Victor's body. "Yes, it's over. He can't hurt you anymore." The sheriff from the nearby town arrived an hour later, along with the doctor. After taking statements from multiple witnesses, including several of Victor's own men who confirmed his threats and behavior, the shooting was ruled justified self-defense. As the doctor tended to Daniel's wound and the bodies were taken away, Vivian sat on the porch steps, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. The ranch had suffered some damage: broken windows, bullet holes in the walls, but it could be repaired. Daniel joined her on the steps, his left arm now properly bandaged and in a sling. "How are you feeling?" he asked, settling beside her. "I don't know," she admitted. "Relieved, sad, free," he nodded, understanding. "It's a lot to process." "For 3 years I've been running from him," she said quietly. "I don't know how to stop running." Daniel's good hand found hers, his fingers intertwining with hers. "Maybe you don't have to run anymore. Maybe it's time to stand still. Build something permanent." Vivian turned to him, seeing the hope in his eyes. "Here, at Silver Creek, if you want," he said. "The ranch needs a good cook, and I—" He paused, suddenly hesitant. "You what?" she prompted. Daniel looked at their joined hands, then back at her face. "I need you, Vivian. These past months, you've brought something to Silver Creek to me that I didn't even know was missing." The simple honesty of his words moved her deeply. "I feel the same way," she whispered. "I know it's too soon," he continued. "You need time to heal, to find your footing now that Victor's gone. I can wait, however long it takes, but I want you to know that when you're ready, I'll be here." Vivian looked out over the ranch, the rolling pastures, the mountains in the distance, the place that had become more of a home to her than anywhere she'd lived since childhood. "What if I'm ready sooner than you think?" she asked softly. Daniel's eyes widened. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that life is short and unpredictable," Vivian replied. "Today proved that. I don't want to waste any more time being afraid of happiness." Slowly, giving him time to pull away if he wanted, she leaned forward and kissed him. Unlike their first kiss the night before, this one held a promise of healing, of future, of home. When they parted, Daniel was smiling. "Does this mean you're staying?" "Yes," Vivian said, feeling certainty settle within her. "I'm staying." "Good," Daniel replied, his smile widening. "Because I meant what I said to Victor. Over my dead body would he ever claim you again?" "Let's hope it never comes to that again," Vivian said, shuddering at how close they'd come to losing everything. "It won't," Daniel assured her. "From now on, the only claiming going on around here will be mutual." As darkness fell over Silver Creek Ranch, Vivian rested her head on Daniel's uninjured shoulder, feeling for the first time in years the sweet weight of belonging somewhere, of belonging to someone who valued her freedom as much as her presence. The coming days would bring challenges, rebuilding damaged parts of the ranch, dealing with the legal aftermath of Victor's death, healing from old wounds, both physical and emotional. But for now, sitting beside Daniel as stars appeared in the vast Wyoming sky, Vivian allowed herself to simply be present in a moment of hard-won peace. 2 months after Victor's death, Silver Creek Ranch was thriving. The bullet holes had been patched, the broken windows replaced, and the memory of that violent day had begun to fade like an old bruise. Daniel's shoulder had healed well, though he sometimes rubbed it absently when rain threatened. Vivian had settled more deeply into ranch life, expanding her role beyond cooking to helping with the ranch's accounts, a skill she'd developed during her marriage to Victor, though he'd never valued her intelligence. Their relationship had grown stronger too, built on shared work, honest conversation, and a deepening trust. Daniel never pushed, never presumed, always giving Vivian space to set the pace. One crisp October evening, as golden leaves drifted from the cottonwoods along the creek, Daniel asked Vivian to ride with him to his favorite spot on the property. "It's a bit of a climb," he warned as they tethered their horses at the base of a steep hill, "but worth the view." Hand in hand, they hiked up the slope until they reached the summit. Vivian gasped at the panorama spread before them. Silver Creek Ranch laid out like a painting, the main house and barns nestled in the valley, pastures stretching to the horizon, mountains rising majestic beyond. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "This is where I come when I need to think," Daniel said, spreading a blanket on a flat rock. or when I need to remember why all the hard work matters." They sat together, watching the sunset bathe the landscape in amber light. "I've been thinking," Daniel said after a comfortable silence. "About?" Vivian prompted when he didn't continue. He took her hand, his expression suddenly serious. "About us. About the future." Vivian's heart quickened. "What about it? I know it's only been 2 months since." "Everything," he said carefully. "And I don't want to rush you, but I also don't want to waste time pretending I don't know what I want." "And what do you want, Daniel Garland?" Vivian asked softly. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "I want you to be my wife, Vivian. I want to build a life with you here at Silver Creek or anywhere else you want to go." He opened the box to reveal a simple but elegant ring, a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds. "It's not as fancy as what you probably had in Denver," he said, suddenly uncertain. "But it's perfect," Vivian interrupted, tears welling in her eyes. "It's absolutely perfect." Hope brightened Daniel's face. "Does that mean?" "Yes," Vivian said without hesitation. "Yes, I'll marry you." Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger, then gathered her into his arms, his kiss conveying everything words couldn't: joy, promise, devotion. When they finally parted, Vivian looked down at the ring sparkling in the fading light. "I never thought I'd wear a wedding ring again," she admitted. "After Victor, I couldn't imagine trusting anyone enough." "What changed?" Daniel asked, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Vivian considered the question. "You did," she said simply. "You showed me that love doesn't have to hurt, that strength can be gentle, that partnership doesn't mean surrender." Daniel's eyes softened. "Vivian Reynolds, you are the bravest person I've ever known. Coming here alone, starting over, standing up to Victor, you've done it all with a grace that amazes me every day." "I don't feel brave," she confessed. "Most days I just feel like I'm figuring things out as I go." "That's what bravery is," Daniel said. "Not the absence of fear, but the willingness to face it anyway." As twilight deepened around them, they sat on their hilltop, planning their future together. They would marry in December after the fall cattle drive. Jake Cooper would stand as Daniel's best man, and Sarah Cooper would be Vivian's matron of honor. The ranch hands would attend, of course, along with neighbors and friends from town. "What about your family?" Vivian asked, suddenly realizing she knew little about Daniel's background. A shadow crossed his face. "My parents died when I was 14. Influenza. I have a sister in St. Louis, but we haven't spoken in years." "Why not?" Vivian asked gently. Daniel sighed. "She married a banker who thought ranching was beneath him. He convinced her I was wasting my potential out here. Last letter I got from her said she wouldn't be writing again unless I came to my senses and moved east." Vivian squeezed his hand. "I'm sorry. Family estrangements leave wounds that never quite heal." "What about you?" Daniel asked. "Any family besides Victor?" Vivian shook her head. "My mother died when I was 12. My father raised me alone until his death when I was 19. That's when Victor stepped in. No siblings, no aunts or uncles that I know of." "Then we'll make our own family," Daniel said with quiet determination. "Right here at Silver Creek." As darkness fell completely, they reluctantly gathered their things and made their way back down the hill. The ranch lights glowed welcomingly in the distance, beckoning them home. The news of their engagement spread quickly through the ranch and surrounding community. Congratulations poured in, along with good-natured teasing from the ranch hands who claimed they'd seen it coming months ago. Sarah Cooper immediately appointed herself wedding planner, insisting that the ranch house parlor be transformed for the occasion. "It'll be the social event of the season," she declared. "I don't need anything elaborate," Vivian protested. "Just a simple ceremony." "Nonsense," Sarah replied firmly. "Every bride deserves a proper wedding, especially one who's found love after such hardship. So Vivian acquiesced, allowing Sarah to order fabric for a new dress and arrange for the circuit preacher to officiate in December. As the wedding preparations progressed, so did life at Silver Creek. The fall cattle drive was successful, bringing a healthy profit that Daniel immediately reinvested in improvements to the ranch, including expanding the main house. "We'll need more room eventually," he explained with a hopeful smile that made Vivian blush. The thought of children, a possibility she'd abandoned after losing her baby, now returned as a cherished hope rather than a painful memory. One November morning, as the first snow dusted the distant peaks, a letter arrived that threw their peaceful preparations into disarray. "It's from Victor's lawyer in Denver," Vivian said, her hands trembling as she broke the seal. Daniel stood beside her as she read, his face growing increasingly concerned as the color drained from hers. "What is it?" he asked when she lowered the letter. "Victor's will," she whispered. "Despite everything, he never changed it. I've inherited everything: his house, his businesses, his fortune." Daniel blinked in surprise. "That's unexpected." "There's more," Vivian continued, her voice hollow. "The will contains conditions. To claim the inheritance, I must return to Denver permanently and maintain his business interests." "And if you don't?" Daniel asked cautiously. "Everything goes to Victor's cousin Bernard, a man almost as cruel as Victor himself." Vivian set the letter down. "The lawyer requests my presence in Denver next week to discuss the matter." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "What do you want to do?" "I don't want Victor's money," Vivian said firmly. "I never did." "I understand that," Daniel replied. "But this inheritance, it represents security, opportunities." Vivian looked around the cozy kitchen where they stood, the heart of the home they were building together. "I have everything I need right here." "At least meet with the lawyer," Daniel suggested. "Learn the details before making a decision." After some consideration, Vivian agreed. 3 days later, they boarded the train to Denver together, Daniel insisting on accompanying her despite her assurances that she could handle it alone. "We're partners now," he reminded her. "Your battles are mine." Denver was both familiar and strange to Vivian as they stepped off the train. The city had grown in the 3 years since her departure, new buildings rising alongside familiar landmarks. Daniel whistled softly, looking up at the grand structures. Quite different from Silver Creek. "Yes," Vivian agreed, feeling oddly detached from the bustling metropolis that had once been her home. "Victor's house, my former home, is in the fashionable district north of here." They checked into a hotel, then proceeded to the offices of Harrington and Walsh, the law firm that had handled Victor's affairs for decades. Mr. Walsh, a thin man with spectacles and a perpetually worried expression, greeted them with surprise when Daniel accompanied Vivian into his office. "Mrs. Reynolds," he said, shaking her hand, "and you are?" "Daniel Garland," Daniel replied, "Vivian's fiancé." Walsh's eyebrows shot up. "I see. Well, this is somewhat irregular. The matter at hand concerns Mrs. Reynolds's inheritance from her late husband." "I'm aware," Daniel said calmly. "Vivian and I have no secrets from each other." Walsh looked uncomfortable, but gestured them to seats. "As I explained in my letter, Mrs. Reynolds, your husband left his entire estate to you. It's quite substantial: the mansion on Millionaire's Row, controlling interest in Reynolds Shipping and Rail, numerous investments and liquid assets exceeding $500,000. Vivian kept her expression neutral, though the figure was staggering far more than she'd imagined. "However," Walsh continued, "the will stipulates that to receive this inheritance, you must maintain permanent residence in Denver and personally oversee the Reynolds business interests. If you decline these terms, everything passes to Mr. Bernard Reynolds." "And if I accept the inheritance but later decide to leave Denver?" Vivian asked. Walsh adjusted his spectacles. "The will is quite clear. Abandonment of either the Denver residence or the business responsibilities would trigger immediate transfer to Bernard Reynolds." Daniel leaned forward. "Is there no way to accept the inheritance without these conditions?" Walsh sighed. "I advised Mr. Reynolds against such restrictive terms, but he was insistent. He said if Mrs. Reynolds wouldn't be his wife in life, she would at least be bound to his legacy in death." A chill ran through Vivian. Even from the grave, Victor was attempting to control her. "I need time to consider this," she said. "Of course," Walsh replied. "However, I should mention that Bernard Reynolds has already contested the will. He claims that since you abandoned your husband, you have no right to inherit." "Abandoned?" Daniel's voice hardened. "After what he did to her?" Walsh looked uncomfortable. "I'm merely relating Mr. Bernard Reynolds's claims. The court will determine their validity." "How long do I have to decide?" Vivian asked. "The court has scheduled a hearing in 3 weeks," Walsh explained. "You'll need to state your intentions then." As they left the law office, Vivian felt the weight of Denver pressing down on her, the memories, the expectations, the ghost of Victor lingering in every familiar street corner. "Let's see the house," Daniel suggested unexpectedly. "Victor's house?" Vivian asked, surprised. "Why?" "Because it's part of what you're being asked to choose," he replied. "You should see it again before deciding." Reluctantly, Vivian agreed. They hired a carriage to take them to the imposing mansion on Millionaire's Row where she had spent 5 years of her life. As they approached, Vivian's breath caught. The house was exactly as she remembered, 3 stories of red brick and white stone, with elaborate gardens and wrought iron fences. Once she had thought it beautiful. Now it looked like an elegant prison. "This is where you lived?" Daniel asked, staring up at the mansion. Vivian nodded. "Victor was very proud of it. He spent a fortune on imported furnishings and artwork." "Would you like to go inside?" Daniel asked gently. Vivian hesitated, then squared her shoulders. "Yes, I think I need to." The butler who answered the door nearly dropped his tray when he saw her. "Mrs. Reynolds, we had no word of your arrival." "Hello, Jennings," Vivian said. "This is Daniel Garland. We'd like to see the house if that's possible." "Of course, madam," Jennings replied, recovering his composure. "Everything has been maintained, as Mr. Reynolds specified." They followed the butler into the grand foyer with its marble floor and sweeping staircase. Memories assaulted Vivian, her first arrival as a bride, Victor carrying her across the threshold, elegant parties where she smiled through bruised ribs, that final terrible night when she fled down these same stairs with only what she could carry. "Are you all right?" Daniel asked quietly, noticing her pallor. "Yes," she said, though her voice shook slightly. "It's just overwhelming." They toured the house, methodically, the formal dining room with its table that seated 20, the library where Victor had conducted business, the music room where Vivian had spent countless hours playing the piano to escape her thoughts. Upstairs, she paused outside the master bedroom. "I can't," she whispered. "Not in there." Daniel immediately guided her away. "You don't have to, you've seen enough." As they descended the stairs, Vivian noticed a painting she didn't recognize, a landscape of mountains and a valley that reminded her of Silver Creek. "That's new," she commented. Jennings, who had been following at a discreet distance, stepped forward. "Yes, madam. Mr. Reynolds acquired it about a year ago. He spent many evenings looking at it." Something in the butler's tone made Vivian look at him more closely. "Jennings, how was Victor after I left?" The butler hesitated, then seemed to come to a decision. "Changed, madam. The first year he was furious, fired half the staff, drank heavily, but then something shifted. He became quieter, more withdrawn. He would sit for hours looking at that painting. "Did he ever mention me?" Vivian asked. "Often," Jennings admitted. "Toward the end, he spoke of finding you, making amends. I believe he genuinely regretted his behavior." Vivian absorbed this information silently. Could Victor truly have changed? Or was this another manipulation, orchestrated from beyond the grave? Outside in the fresh air again, Daniel waited for her to speak first. "It's strange," she finally said. "I thought coming back would be harder, that I'd feel Victor's presence more strongly. But he seems gone. This is just a house now." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "What are you thinking about the inheritance?" Vivian looked back at the mansion. "I don't want to live here again. I don't want to run Victor's businesses, but I'm thinking of another possibility." "Which is?" Daniel prompted. "What if I accepted the inheritance, but only long enough to sell everything and put the money to better use?" she suggested. "Victor hurt many people besides me. Perhaps his fortune could help them." Daniel smiled slowly. "I think that's a brilliant idea." They spent the next 2 days meeting with Mr. Walsh, developing a plan. If the court ruled in Vivian's favor, she would temporarily return to Denver to liquidate Victor's assets. The proceeds would establish a foundation to help women and children escaping abusive situations, something sadly lacking when Vivian had needed it most. "Bernard Reynolds will fight this," Walsh warned. "He expected to inherit everything." "Let him," Vivian said with newfound determination. "I lived with Victor Reynolds for 5 years. I'm not afraid of his cousin." As predicted, the court battle was brutal. Bernard Reynolds painted Vivian as a gold-digging opportunist who had abandoned her devoted husband, then conveniently returned after his death to claim his fortune. But Vivian had allies Victor never anticipated. Martha, the housekeeper who had helped her escape, testified about the abuse she had witnessed. Dr. Patterson, who had treated Vivian after she lost the baby, came forward with medical records documenting her injuries. Even Silas Turner, surprisingly, testified that Victor had been obsessed with reclaiming Vivian by any means necessary. After 2 weeks of testimony, the judge ruled in Vivian's favor, granting her the entire estate with no conditions. The restrictive terms of Victor's will were deemed unenforceable. "It's over," Daniel said as they left the courthouse. "Truly over this time." Vivian felt a lightness she hadn't expected. "Yes, it is. And now we can go home after I set a few things in motion here." Over the next month, Vivian worked tirelessly with lawyers and bankers to dismantle Victor's empire. The mansion was sold to a railroad magnate. The shipping company went to Victor's business partner. Investments were liquidated, assets cataloged and sold. When it was done, the Reynolds Foundation for Women's Protection was established with an endowment of over $400,000, a fortune that would help countless women escape situations like Vivian's. As a final act, Vivian visited Victor's grave. The elaborate marble monument seemed excessive for the man she had known, but she stood before it anyway, needing this last confrontation. "I forgive you," she said quietly to the stone. "Not for your sake, but for mine. I won't carry your shadow with me anymore." She placed a single white rose on the grave, not in remembrance, but as a symbol of the peace she had found without him. Daniel waited at the cemetery gates, respectfully giving her this moment alone. When she rejoined him, he searched her face. "Ready?" Vivian nodded, taking his hand. "Ready." They boarded the train that afternoon, leaving Denver behind. As the city receded and the open plain spread before them, Vivian felt the last weight lifting from her heart. "What are you thinking?" Daniel asked, noticing her smile. "That I'm going home," she replied. "To Silver Creek, to you." Daniel squeezed her hand. "Just 2 weeks until the wedding." "I can hardly wait," Vivian said. though I think poor Sarah might have a conniption when she sees what I've brought back." In her luggage was fabric for a wedding dress far more elaborate than originally planned, cream-colored silk with delicate lace. She'd also purchased a wedding gift for Daniel, the painting of mountains from Victor's house that had reminded her so much of Silver Creek. "She'll manage," Daniel laughed. "She's been bossing the ranch hands around like a general, getting everything ready." The train journey passed pleasantly, the rhythm of the rails lulling them into comfortable conversation about their future plans. With her portion of Victor's estate, she had kept enough to feel secure without being excessive. They could expand Silver Creek, perhaps add sheep to their cattle operation, build a proper school for the children of ranch workers. "And children of our own," Daniel added softly. "Someday, when you're ready." Vivian leaned against his shoulder, allowing herself to imagine it, a little boy with Daniel's blue eyes, a girl with her auburn hair, running free under Wyoming skies. "Someday soon," she replied. They arrived back at Silver Creek to find the ranch transformed. Sarah Cooper had outdone herself, recruiting every available hand to help decorate for the upcoming wedding. Pine boughs and ribbons adorned the main house. The barn had been cleared and decorated for the wedding feast. "Hope you don't mind," Sarah said when they expressed amazement at the preparations. "We decided the parlor was too small with all the acceptances coming in." "Acceptances?" Vivian asked. Sarah grinned. "Turns out you two are more popular than you realized. Half the county's planning to attend." The remaining days before the wedding passed in a flurry of activity. Vivian's new dress fabric was whisked away by Sarah and two other women, who worked night and day to create a gown worthy of a Denver socialite, though Vivian insisted on a simpler design than what would have been fashionable in the city. Daniel, meanwhile, found himself constantly pulled aside by ranch hands seeking advice on proper wedding attire and behavior. "You'd think none of them had ever been to a wedding before," he complained good-naturedly to Vivian one evening. "For many of them, this might be the first they've attended out here," she pointed out. "They want to do right by you." The night before the wedding, as tradition dictated they spend apart, Vivian found herself too excited to sleep. She sat by her window, looking out at the star-filled sky, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. From a naive young bride to a battered wife, from a desperate fugitive to a woman who had faced down her abuser, and one each step had led her to this place, to Daniel, to a love she could trust. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Who is it?" she called, surprised by a visitor so late. "Sarah," came the reply. "I've brought something for you." Vivian opened the door to find Sarah holding a small wooden box. "What's this?" "Something old," Sarah said with a smile. "My mother's earrings. I wore them at my wedding, and now I'd like you to wear them at yours." Touched, Vivian opened the box to find a pair of delicate pearl earrings. "Sarah, they're beautiful." "Are you sure?" "Absolutely," the older woman affirmed. "Jake and I never had daughters, but if we had, I'd have wanted one like you." Vivian hugged her, tears threatening. "Thank you for this and for everything you've done to make tomorrow special." Sarah patted her back. "You deserve it, child. Now get some sleep. A bride needs her rest." But sleep remained elusive. As midnight approached, Vivian slipped from the house, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the December chill. She walked to the small garden behind the house, breathing in the crisp air and gathering her thoughts. "Couldn't sleep either." Daniel's voice came from the shadows. Vivian smiled, not entirely surprised to find him there. "Isn't it bad luck to see the bride before the wedding?" He stepped closer, moonlight illuminating his face. "I'll risk it." "What are you doing out here?" she asked as he took her hands, "thinking about tomorrow, about the future." "About how lucky I am that you walked into my kitchen looking for work 8 months ago." Vivian squeezed his hands. "I'm the lucky one. You gave me more than a job, Daniel. You gave me a home when I'd forgotten what that meant." They stood together in the moonlight, the ranch quiet around them, the stars bearing witness to their whispered hopes and promises for the life they would begin tomorrow. "I should go back," Vivian finally said, "before Sarah catches us and decides we've ruined all her careful planning." Daniel laughed softly. "One last thing before you go." From his pocket, he produced a small package wrapped in brown paper. "A wedding gift. I was going to wait until tomorrow, but now seems right." Vivian unwrapped it carefully to find a small leather-bound book. Opening it, she gasped. Inside were sketches of her. Vivian cooking in the kitchen, reading on the porch, riding across the pasture. Each drawing captured a moment of her life at Silver Creek, rendered with surprising skill and obvious affection. "Daniel, these are beautiful," she breathed. "I had no idea you could draw like this." He shrugged, looking almost shy. "My mother taught me. I haven't drawn much in years, but when you came along, I wanted to capture it all." Vivian traced a finger over a sketch of herself laughing, her head thrown back in joy. "Is this really how you see me?" "It's exactly how I see you," he confirmed. "Strong, beautiful, free." She closed the book carefully, holding it to her heart. "Thank you, I'll treasure this always." With a last, lingering kiss, one that promised more tomorrows than either could count, they parted until their wedding day. December 18, 1878 dawned clear and cold, the kind of winter day that sparkled with possibility. By noon, the ranch was filled with guests, neighboring ranchers and their families, shopkeepers from town, the doctor, the sheriff, even the banker who had once denied Daniel a loan but now counted him among his best clients. In the small bedroom that had been hers since arriving at Silver Creek, Vivian prepared with Sarah's help. The cream silk dress fit perfectly, its simple lines more elegant than the elaborate fashions she'd worn as Victor's wife. Her auburn hair was arranged with white flowers, and Sarah's pearl earrings completed the picture. "You look beautiful," Sarah said, stepping back to admire her handiwork. Vivian studied her reflection, hardly recognizing the confident woman who looked back at her. "I feel beautiful and happy." A knock at the door announced Jake Cooper. "Ladies, it's time. Everyone's seated in the barn." Sarah hurried out to take her place, leaving Vivian alone with Jake, who had agreed to walk her down the aisle in the absence of any family. "Ready, Miss Vivian?" he asked, offering his arm. "More than ready, Mr. Cooper," she replied with a smile. They walked from the house to the barn, where the large doors stood open to reveal the transformation inside. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a warm glow over the gathered guests. Pine boughs and red ribbons decorated the walls, and a path of woven blankets led to the front, where Daniel waited beside the preacher. When Daniel saw her, his face lit with such joy that Vivian nearly forgot to breathe. He stood tall and handsome in a new black suit, his dark hair neatly combed, his blue eyes never leaving hers as she walked toward him. The ceremony itself was a blur of emotion, the preacher's words, the exchange of rings, the promises made before God and community. What Vivian would remember most clearly was Daniel's voice, steady and sure as he spoke his vows. "I, Daniel James Garland, take you, Vivian Elizabeth Reynolds, to be my lawfully wedded wife. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do us part." And her own voice, stronger than she would have believed possible 3 years ago, as she made the same promise to him. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the preacher declared. "You may kiss your bride." Daniel's kiss was gentle and reverent, a public affirmation of the private devotion they had already pledged to each other. When they turned to face their guests as Mr. and Mrs. Garland, The cheers and applause were deafening. The celebration lasted well into the night. There was dancing to fiddle music, a feast that showcased Vivian's cooking alongside contributions from neighboring ranches, and more well wishes than either of them had expected. "To the finest couple in Wyoming territory," the sheriff toasted, raising his glass. "May your days be long and your troubles few." As midnight approached, Daniel led Vivian away from the festivities to the main house, where he swept her into his arms to carry her across the threshold of the master bedroom, now their bedroom. "Welcome home, Mrs. Garland," he said softly, setting her on her feet. Vivian looked around the room, noting the changes he'd made in her absence: new curtains, a larger bed, fresh paint. "When did you do all this?" "While you were in Denver," he admitted. "I wanted it to be perfect for you." "It is perfect," she said, reaching up to touch his face. "You are perfect." That night, in the privacy of their room, they consummated their marriage with tender passion, Daniel's touch healing the last of Vivian's wounds, erasing the memory of Victor's cruelty with gentle adoration. Later, as they lay together in the quiet darkness, Vivian rested her head on Daniel's chest, listening to the strong, steady beat of his heart. "Happy," he murmured, stroking her hair. "Completely," she replied. "I never imagined I could feel this way again, safe, loved, whole." Daniel's arms tightened around her. "I promise you'll feel that way every day for the rest of our lives." "I believe you," Vivian said, and realized it was true. The fear that had been her constant companion for so long was gone, replaced by a quiet certainty in their future together. Spring came early to Wyoming in 1879, bringing with it new beginnings for Silver Creek Ranch. With the funds from Vivian's inheritance, they expanded their operations, purchasing additional grazing land and improving their breeding stock. Daniel's prediction that they would need more room proved prescient when, in April, Vivian shared the news they had both been hoping for. They were expecting a child in November. "A baby," Daniel whispered, placing his hand reverently on her still flat stomach. "Our baby." Vivian covered his hand with hers. "Are you happy?" "Happy doesn't begin to describe it," he replied, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "Vivian, you've given me everything I ever wanted: a true partner, a loving wife, and now a family." As her pregnancy progressed, Vivian bloomed. The morning sickness passed quickly, and by summer she was glowing with health and contentment. Daniel watched over her with loving attentiveness, insisting she rest when needed but never treating her as fragile or incapable. In August, an unexpected letter arrived from St. Louis. Daniel's estranged sister Dorothy had read about the expansion of Silver Creek Ranch in a business journal and decided to reach out. "She wants to visit," Daniel said, stunned, "with her husband and children." "That's wonderful," Vivian exclaimed. "Will you write back?" Daniel hesitated. "It's been 10 years. What if we have nothing in common anymore?" "She's still your sister," Vivian reminded him gently. "And those children are your nieces and nephews. Family is precious, Daniel. You taught me that." So Daniel wrote back, inviting Dorothy and her family to visit after the baby was born. To his surprise, her response was immediate and enthusiastic. Years of silence fell away as they exchanged letters throughout the fall, rebuilding the connection they had lost. November brought the first snowfall and, with it, the birth of Catherine Martha Garland, 7 pounds of perfection with Daniel's blue eyes and a dusting of Vivian's auburn hair. "She's beautiful," Daniel said, cradling his daughter with careful hands. "Just like her mother." Vivian, tired but radiant, watched her husband and child with a heart so full it seemed impossible to contain such happiness. "She's perfect." The arrival of Catherine completed their family in a way neither had fully anticipated. Nights of interrupted sleep and days of constant care were balanced, by the immeasurable joy of watching their daughter grow and thrive. Christmas that year was modest but meaningful, with promises of Dorothy's visit in the spring adding to their anticipation. As they sat before the fire on Christmas Eve, Catherine sleeping peacefully in her cradle beside them, Vivian reflected on the journey that had brought them here. "This time last year, I was terrified that Victor had found me," she mused. "I was ready to run again, to give up everything we were building here." Daniel took her hand. "And now I know that running isn't always the answer," she said. "Sometimes you have to stand your ground and fight for what matters." "And what matters to you, Vivian Garland?" Daniel asked. Though his smile suggested he knew the answer, she leaned against him, watching the firelight play across their daughter's peaceful face. "This, you, our family, Silver Creek, a life built on love instead of fear." Daniel pressed a kiss to her temple. "That's what matters to me too." As the fire burned low and snow fell softly outside, Vivian Garland closed her eyes in contentment. From the ashes of a painful past, she and Daniel had forged something beautiful, a marriage of equals, a home filled with love, a future bright with promise. Victor Reynolds had tried to claim her one last time, but Daniel Garland had stood firm, offering not possession but partnership, not control but freedom. And in that freedom, Vivian had found her true self, not a victim, not a fugitive, but a woman of strength and courage, capable of both giving and receiving love without condition or fear. "Merry Christmas, my love," Daniel whispered as the clock struck midnight. "Merry Christmas," Vivian replied, knowing that every day with him, with their daughter, on their ranch was a gift more precious than any she could have imagined when she first fled Denver 3 years ago. Outside, the Wyoming winter wrapped Silver Creek Ranch in a blanket of white, promising that spring would come again, bringing new growth, new life, new beginnings. Just as it always did, just as it always would.